This weekend, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice apparated into theaters. This marks the first movie for Tim Burton since 2019's Dumbo, so now it's time to rank every Tim Burton movie that's rated PG-13 or lower, from worst to best. Now, Ed Wood, Sweeney Todd, and Sleepy Hollow will not be on this list due to the R rating. Also, even though Nightmare Before Christmas has his name on it, he did not direct it, so it does not qualify. Movies like Coraline and Nine, which are also incorrectly thought to be Burton movies, also will not be on this list. With that in mind, let's get started. Number 17, Alice in Wonderland. Now, in theory, Tim Burton doing an Alice in Wonderland adaptation should be a perfect match. Unfortunately, the film has a cliche chosen one prophecy story, a wooden performance from the lead actress, and doesn't have any fun or whimsy of the original story, instead turning it into a war movie. Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter are good in the cast, but that's it. Number 16, Dumbo, another live-action Disney adaptation directed by Tim Burton that also fails to capture the spirit of the original. This movie definitely shows why not every animated Disney film needs a remake, because some things just don't work in live action. Case in point, the story focuses on very boring human characters that we found in this film, and overall, the film is just very bland. Number 17, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the only film on this list I had not seen prior to making the list. I did not grow up with Pee Wee Herman, so I have no nostalgia for the show or film, and that's a problem, because the film doesn't really take the time to introduce the characters to a new audience. It expects you to have prior knowledge of the show. And I like Herman going on a trip to get his stolen bike back, but the stakes feel a bit unfulfilled when the movie tells you immediately who it is that stole his bike. I think this film would have worked better in history, but let the audience try to figure out who stole the bike. There are some good gags in this film, and while Pee Wee Herman can be overly annoying at times, he can also be endearing with his childlike innocence. I also loved how this film had some meta humor towards the end and gets kind of wacky. Not a film I'll personally watch again, but I still enjoyed it. Number 14, 2001's Planet of the Apes. The original Planet of the Apes is so perfect and iconic, it doesn't make much sense to remake it. But Tim Burton sure tried. Unfortunately, anything that was interesting about the original is not here. The shocking twist ending of the original in this version is turned into a bad parody by ending on a pun. The slow burn and world building is all sacrificed to make this an action film. Number 13, Batman Returns. The movie is well directed with great performances, but I'm not a fan of how dark and violent it can get. Tim Burton's previous Batman film still had his signature macabre style, but it also balanced it out with fun moments. Here, it's all doom and gloom. Penguin is an incredibly evil, vile villain, yet the film still expects us to have sympathy for him in the end, which is a huge problem. Michelle Pfeiffer is great as Catwoman, she plays off of Michael Keaton very well, but it does cross the line with how dark it gets. Number 12, Big Fish. I think this is a great anthology film with some fun characters, and it's kind of a fairy tale for adults. Ewan McGregor is great in this, but he does have a weird accent that kind of throws me off. It has a lot of character drama, particularly between the main character and his father, and considering this came out a couple years before Burton's version of Wonka, this leads me to believe that between those two films, he had some father issues he was trying to work out through these films. This is a good character drama with a good love story and an emotional ending, but it's not quite as good as some of his more bolder, daring films. Number 11, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which ironically has Wonka as the main character. Charlie in this version is written to be this perfect little child that has no flaws, which is kind of unrealistic. And again, this film spends so much time on Wonka's daddy issues. But the film still has all of Burton's trademark quirky humor and visuals. And I like that the songs are taken directly from the book, and each has a different musical style from a different decade, but it does pad the runtime with the father issue subplot. Number 10, Dark Shadows. I thought this had a good story. I enjoyed the 1970s aesthetic along with its dark humor and witty script. It's one of Johnny Depp's funniest performances and has some good third act twists. Number 9, Frankenweenie. Tim Burton's homage to old black and white monster movies. It does so in a very clever way with great stop motion and parodies and homages to everything from Godzilla to Gremlins. And for an animated Disney film, I'm surprised with how much violence they let Burton get away with. Number 8, Big Eyes. This is a nice drama film from Burton that also happens to be based on a true story. It's got an interesting story with a great cast. Christoph Waltz does a good job of being charismatic, but at the same time being super unlikable. I was interested to see where the story would go. It really felt for Amy Adams' character. Number 7, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. I wouldn't necessarily call this a legacy sequel, though it does have members of the original cast while also focusing on the next generation, because legacy sequels tend to be essentially the first movie again. This, for the most part, is not. It does what all great sequels do, which is expand upon the ideas of the original. We get to spend more time in the afterlife, and Burton really brings his trademark macabre humor and touch to the film. He's also a big user of practical effects, which is refreshing. It feels like no time has passed for Michael Keaton, as he is very naturally returning to the role of Beetlejuice. Jenna Ortega's character is interesting in the sense that she's the daughter of Winona Ryder's character from the first film, but unlike Winona Ryder's character, she's not super interested in the paranormal or supernatural. And instead of using Beetlejuice to get rid of a threat in the living world, he is instead used to get rid of a threat in the underworld. There are some good twists in the first and second act, the whole cast is great, and has a nice, sweet, family-centric story, but what holds it back is it does kind of fall apart in the third act. The third act climax is essentially the same as the first film, and there are also a few too many characters and plot lines. There's a plotline about Beetlejuice's dead fiancée who's out for revenge, and they don't really do anything with that till almost the end. And there's a plotline about one of the villains trying to use Jenna Ortega's character to escape to the world of the living. They didn't really feel so much like characters as much as they did plot devices to get the main characters for the story needed them to be to move the plot along. It's not as fresh as the original, but it still comes pretty close. It's worth seeing 3 times. Number 6, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. What if Tim Burton did an X-Men film? That's what this movie is. The monster kids are all very creative, it keeps the creepy imagery that was found throughout the book, and is arguably one of Burton's darkest films with some of the directions it goes. And it's not dark in a humorous way like his other films, it's dark in a dark way. Now, the lead character, played by Asa Butterfield, is a bit wooden in his performance, and Samuel L. Jackson goes a bit over the top as the villain, but I still really dug this film. Number 5, Beetlejuice. This is one of those movies where you watch it and you think, they really do not make movies like this anymore. The practical effects are gorgeous and still hold up, and the plot is essentially reverse Ghostbusters, where instead of humans getting rid of ghosts, it's a ghost trying to get rid of humans. It's clever, Michael Keaton gives a fun and charismatic performance, and Burton's depiction of the afterlife being colorful and zany you could tell inspired Corpse Bride years later. Number 4, Mars Attacks. I know some people find this movie too campy and goofy, but here's the thing, it's supposed to be. Much like Frankenweenie, this is an homage to the B-movies that Burton grew up with. It has fun, it's got a great cast who all know exactly what kind of silly movie they're in, the aliens' design is creative, the language the aliens speak is unique, but there's 2 things that hold it back. They don't explain why the aliens are afraid of birds, and the third act does seem a bit rushed. As much of a mixed reception as this film gets, it does seem to have gained a bit of a following since it came out. The Martians were in a Super Bowl commercial with other famous movie aliens a few years ago, and they just announced a game based on this movie is coming out. So there are people that like this movie, and I'm one of them. Number 3, Edward Scissorhands. The first Tim Burton movie to star his longtime collaborator, Johnny Depp. This is a sweet love story that if you look at it as an allegory for disability representation, I think does very well. As creative as the main character is, it does feel a bit tropey, because you've got your misunderstood hero who's judged by appearances, you've got the love interest current boyfriend being jealous of misunderstood hero. It feels a bit like Burton is taking a lot of inspiration from stories like Beauty and the Beast, but it's still a charming movie. Number 2, Corpse Bride. Again, a very sweet love story. Well, sweet for Tim Burton movie standards. It's got creative characters, great plot twists, and emotional punch, but it only has one good song in the movie. For me, the rest of the songs kind of bog it down and pad the runtime, and the twist of who the villain is very predictable. But overall, it's definitely a passion project for Burton, and you can tell a lot of love and care was put into it. And the number 1 pick is Batman 1989. Considering this came out at a time when we didn't really know how to make comic book movies yet, it's practically a miracle this turned out as great as it did. It mixes the tone of the campier Adam West show with Burton's signature twisted style very well. Jack Nicholson steals the show as the Joker. Michael Keaton gives an iconic performance as Batman, and it balances the tone of campy and serious just right. This is one of the few pre-MCU and Christopher Nolan era comic book movies that still holds up. It's going to share your ranking of your Tim Burton movies, and I will see you next time. Over the past 2 weeks, I did put up some polls and questions. So here's what you had to say. I asked what the best Johnny Depp role in a Tim Burton film is. Portrait Reviews says Alice in Wonderland. Jacob Martin says Edward Scissorhands. Wolverine says Ichabod Crane from Sleepy Hollow. I have not seen that movie, but I will take your word for it. Friday at Flix 94, longtime friend of the channel, says Ed Wood. Again, R-rated movie that I haven't seen, but I'll just have to take your word for it. I then asked what your favorite Helena Bonham Carter role in a Burton film is, and Movie Reviews by Josh Buck says Corpse Bride. Wolverine says Mrs. Levitt. Film Watcher, longtime subscriber, says her role in Corpse Bride is really great. The character is interesting, and Helena Bonham Carter gives a really great vocal performance, and she has a lovely singing voice. And honestly, I have to agree with that. And finally, I put up a poll asking what you think Burton's best decade was, and the winner of that poll was the 90s. Thank you all so much for your participation. Now let's get to the top 5.